Morning, BookTube. Bill Ruttenberg here with the Ruttenberg Library. Come to you this morning with a book chat. I want to talk about a recent book that I read. It's been a week or two ago that I finally got it done, and it was called The Caning, The Assault That Drove America to Civil War by Stephen Puleo. This was a book that was recommended to me several months back by Peg at the History Shelf. When I was doing a book or a shelf tour, I had hit one of Stephen Puleo's other books, The Dark Tide, on the shelf over there, and she had said or asked me, "Have you read The Caning? I think you'd really like The Caning." And then it was kind of I don't know if it was coincidental or whatever, but Todd at Todd's Bursting Bookshelf had a shelf tour going, and he put this book up in his shelf tour right about the exact same time, and I thought, okay, I get the idea here. Message has been sent, and so I had ordered this book and got it in. I finally got it read, and it was an excellent book. And so I wanted to do a little book chat and tell you a little bit about this book and recommend it to you if you're a lover of history, of learning about causes of the Civil War. There's several reasons to read this. But anyway, this is, like I said, The Caning, The Assault That Drove America to Civil War by Stephen Puleo. This is a Westholme Publishers book. It's 374 pages long. It was published in 2002 in Yardley, Pennsylvania. 337 pages of it is text. Really good book. Let me show you. It's got some pictures throughout, just black and white photos from the time period. It's, like I said, really good. Stephen Puleo, the author, I got some notes here, so excuse me. Stephen Puleo, the author, he's an author, historian, teacher, public speaker, and communications professional. He's published 7 narrative history books. Those 7 are Voyage of Mercy, American Treasures, A City So Grand, The Boston Italians, The Caning, Dark Tide, and Due to Enemy Action. He's a former award-winning newspaper reporter and contributor to American history and other publications. He holds a master's degree in history and teaches at Suffolk University in Boston. And I got that information off his website and then off the back cover of the book here. But this book, great book about the late antebellum period, the late 1850s. It's gonna his main preface, his main thesis of the book is that the caning of Charles Sumner by Preston Brooks was the catalyst for the entire Civil War. It caused numerous other events to happen that led to the Civil War. And so the book, as it gets going, it talks about the Civil War in Kansas, gives a brief history of what was going on. I really liked that because there's a lot of stuff that happened in Kansas, and if you get too bogged down in the details, if you're not necessarily a lover of the time period, it can get kind of dry. But he did a really good job of keeping the narrative flowing, and that's something he did throughout the entire book. He kept the narrative going so that it was extremely entertaining. So he talked about the situation, didn't get bogged down in too many details. And at the same time, as he's talking about Kansas, he's talking about that spread of slavery to the west into the new territories, which is what Kansas was because of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. Excuse me. He talks about the Fugitive Slave Act, and he talks about how all of those caused a huge rift in the United States at that time. He gives... As he moves through the book, he starts talking about Charles Sumner, gives a brief history of Charles Sumner, and talks about how he was a pretty serious guy. He's not a guy that jokes around. His speeches are in your face, intense, no holds bar here. I mean, he doesn't hold back on anything, especially when he gets to, he gives that brief history up to his speech, The Crime Against Kansas. And just to give you... an idea of what that speech was like, I grabbed a couple paragraphs out of here I'd like to read to you. So in that speech, he makes some pretty insulting remarks towards Andrew Butler of South Carolina. So these are just a few of the paragraphs, and if you've never seen Charles Sumner, There's Charles Sumner. Slavery now stands erect, clanking its chains on the territory of Kansas, Sumner roared, surrounded by a code of death and trampling upon all cherished liberties, whether of speech, the press, the bar, the trial by jury, or the electoral franchise. And so, he starts that speech off, just really hammering on slavery. But then he takes his speech, in his hammering on slavery was nothing new at all. He's, throughout his career, especially as we head towards 1850, he's always hammered against slavery. It's what he's known for. He's one of the abolitionists in Congress, one of the hardcore abolitionists. And so, this is the part that really, because what he says about slavery really is not that different than anything else he said. But this is where he steps, you could say, I don't know if he steps across the line. It kind of depends on your opinion, obviously. But this is what really sparked the issue, the caning. So he began by comparing Butler to the fictitious, so speaking of Andrew Butler of South Carolina in Charles Sumner's speech here, comparing Butler to the fictitious Don Quixote. Sumner had borrowed Don Quixote from the library to prepare his speech. A man who believed himself to be a chivalrous knight, but who was actually deluding himself. A true knight who practiced genuine chivalry would have resisted the temptation of slavery, but Butler could not. Instead, Sumner charged Butler had chosen a mistress to whom he has made vows, and who, though ugly to others, is always lovely to him. Though polluted in the sight of the world, is chaste in his sight. I mean the harlot, slavery. He labeled Douglas, speaking of Stephen Douglas, the squire of slavery. It's very Sancho Panza, ready to do all its humiliating offices. Douglas, pacing at the back of the Senate chamber, later recalled saying to himself, "That damn fool will get himself killed by some other damn fool." South Carolina Congressman Preston Brooks, who is this guy with the cane, was in the Senate chamber for some of Sumner's first day speech and was deeply offended to hear Butler, his second cousin, compared to a foolish old Don Quixote who embraced his wench, the harlot slavery. In fact, Sumner's repeated sexual reference in the speech, his use of the words like harlot, virgin, and rape were likely particularly galling to Southern slaveholders who repeatedly chafed at stubborn rumors, many proven true after the Civil War, that they sometimes engaged in sexual relations with their slaves and even sired children. Sumner's choice of language was designed to cut to the quick about this most controversial and sensitive topic. And that's exactly what his speech does. It gets to the point, and it's very insulting. And it was a 5-hour speech. It took 2 days to do the speech in the Congress. And it ruffles a lot of feathers. So after Stephen Puleo gives that description of what Charles Sumner, his history, his background, and then a little bit about the speech, he then gives a brief history of Preston Brooks. And for me, that was great, because I didn't know really anything other than about Preston Brooks, other than he was just kind of fiery and was sticking up for family. That was all I knew about him. And he gives the background and talks about, and he gives a good picture of the code of honor in the South, and why they, talks about duels, how the code of honor leads to duels and stuff like that. And he talks about how Preston Brooks was a family man and would uphold the honor of family. He just does a really good job of, I don't want to say defending Preston Brooks, but just explaining why he did what he did. So that was really good for me, because I didn't know anything about Preston Brooks. So this gives me, some new story or something to add to the story in my classroom when we talk about this event. It talks about a lot about how South Carolina and the rest of the South, but especially South Carolina, how uncompromising they were at this time period, and why this was such a controversial issue. his book then leads to just the whole account of Preston Brooks hunting Charles Sumner down after a couple days after the speech, waiting for him, and he couldn't get him outside the Senate chamber, and so he went into the Senate chamber and just hunting him down and then beating him 30 some times with the cane. He broke this cane over Sumner's head and shoulders, and he does some serious damage to Sumner, and his description is great. It talks about the northern and southern reactions, how northerners wanted to, really press charges and kick him out of office and press charges and everything, and how southerners were so ecstatic that he stuck up for the South. They were sending him golden topped canes, and notes of encouragement that, some that boys. And anyway, the book, after it goes through this, then it goes through and starts talking about individuals, giving really brief biographical sketch within the story of the events that followed the caning. And so he's gonna talk about some people in the book like Daniel Webster, William Seward, John Brown, Stephen Douglas, Abe Lincoln, John C. Fremont. He'll talk about James Buchanan, Roger Taney. And so, he's going to hit some of those big people that follow with the events that follow the caning. Some of the big events that he's going to really highlight in here is John Brown and the Pottawatomie Massacre. The 1856 election with John C. Fremont pitted against James Buchanan. The Dred Scott case, which, became a huge ordeal. The Lecompton Constitution in Kansas, the 1858 debates between Stephen Douglas and Abe Lincoln, and then the House divided speech, and how that's kind of the epitome of everything that's going on. And then it leads into the 1860 election and, of course, the Civil War. He doesn't, he ends right at the beginning of the Civil War just to say that it got started. He does no detail on the Civil War. But the whole point of the book is how this led to the Civil War. So for this whole book, I thought he did a really good job building his case with his main thesis. Excuse me. I greatly enjoyed the book. I don't agree with his thesis necessarily. I think that the caning was just part of the buildup. I don't think it was the cause. I just think it was one of the many effects that led into the Civil War. That's just my opinion. I think it probably goes more back to the Compromise of 1850 with the Fugitive Slave Act and some of the other stuff that came with that compromise, or the 1854 compromise, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. I think those were probably more the causes of the Civil War, the beginnings of that buildup. But and I think this is more within the effects of those events. But that's just my opinion. I think he did a good job, building his case. I think it was excellent. So great book. It was easy to read, easy to understand, very fast paced. For me, I give it a 5-star. I think I would highly recommend it to anyone studying the time period of that era building up to the Civil War, that antebellum period. I think it's one of the great stories, one of those rabbit trails in history. And so thank you to Peg for recommending the book, and thank you for Todd for unknowingly reaffirming that recommendation. And this is, as I said, been Bill Ruttenberg with the Ruttenberg Library, and this has been my book chat about The Caning, the assault that drove America to Civil War by Stephen Puleo. Thank you for watching, and have a great day, BookTube.